This will be a video article what will be of particular interest to MGTOWs, MRA and anonymous activists interested in equality and the reduction of inhumane practices within society. It covers perceived racism amongst men and the reason why men do not understand the difference between racism and sexism under the context of competition. This is already a paper of mine, so it is covered by copyright. Don't reproduce this content without referencing it for your own content protection or accusations of plagiarism. The reason why I'm being so brief about this is because turd-flinging monkey beat me to the punch with video content, but not in written content, about this natural competition phenomenon amongst men, but does not account for psychological conditioning that I was going to cover in my video. So if you want to learn the basics in this phenomena, I suggest you watch Turd-Flinging Monkey's video link below. The reality is that men see all other men naturally as the opposition. This is a biological evolutionary adaptation for survival and reproductive success. Haldane, 1974, and Amongst All Mammals, Lebeyouf, 1974. Men are taught to see everything as a racial issue rather than just healthy competition. In the 21st century, men are not allowed to play contact sports in school, and participate in competition in its purest form is discouraged. By doing this, healthy attitudes towards competition, like grace in defeat and respectful winner, are not cultivated, such as the shaking of hands after contest. This is why men misunderstand the origin of the adversarial positions they are forced into by biology, and end up believing anything that they're told without question. Weck, 1973. The repercussions of this is looking for alternative explanations for their adversarial nature, but are then handed a convenient explanation called racism or in-group bias. Hodkinson, 2007. Though this phenomenon exists on individualistic measure, all men are a singular in-group consisting of one person, and then an identity outside the in-group, just by the position of competition amongst men, which has nothing to do with racism or in-group bias, because of its individual singular nature is male-on-male sexism, and that has more to do with biology and evolution than personal preference. Geary, 1998. Whether you have a creationist or a purely evolution-based belief system, you cannot find fault of the reason men see other men as a potential adversaries. Therefore it is sexism, not racism, that motivates an individualistic, group or personal protection bias. You may be confused by now. How does sexism fit into this? Well, if men see all other men as competition and exclude women from that category, then it's sexism towards men. Men are the main source of misandry. By this stage you're asking the question, isn't that women hating men? And my stern reply will be, according to psychology, especially cognitive psychology and social science, demonstrate that women don't usually hate men, they just see them as a utility. This is why women are overwhelmingly likely not to outright hate you, unless you don't behave like a utility and give them whatever they want. But it also means they don't usually love you either. Of course, to explain this would take us away from the topic at hand. If you as a man find yourself having a compulsion to be angry at or want to rebel against somebody of a different ethnic background, it is likely because they are men or a threat, not because they are of a particular race. This is demonstrated in African cultural conflict, where it is a different tribe, not a different race, that invokes conflict. El Badawi, 2000. Usually when it becomes a racial issue is when it comes to reproduction. Usually racism stems from paternity reassurance and cultural eradication. Fiaran, 2003. patterns outlined in a number of studies, it shows that ethnic conflict in communities does not tend to exist until the ratio of ethnic groups become high enough to threaten another. Reynald Quirol, 2002, such as seen with Islam in Europe. There is usually a genuine concern behind racism, not an open or instinctive response to be racist, but to be cautious about any newcomer. University of Nottingham, Bleaney, 2009. When one ethnic group becomes threatened by another ethnic group, it is normally then that racism is recorded in any significant level, according to real qualitative and quantitative research. I will use only one citation because research in this field is too extensive. Garcia Montalvo, 2004. This demonstrates that the research studies that announce racism as significant or even makes any difference in a population use the methodology of closing their eyes and wishing really hard, or fabricate statistics by intentional artificial inflation. That is right. I called any researches that have claimed a significant result about racism frauds, liars, charlatans and intentionally academically dishonest. The social science of SJWs that has the assertion that everybody is racist is a pure fabrication and has been proven to be so by cognitive chronometry, the same used in the study How Long It Takes You to Respond to Another Race caption online questionnaire. The fact that people stop to think about race before they answer a question means they are mindful of their answers and are trying to adjust for something that doesn't exist, recorded by cognitive chronometry. It takes longer to think about something that does not exist, Posner, 2002, than something that does, according to deception detection techniques and study. 6 to 8 milliseconds for complex cognition to 0.41 milliseconds is the time it takes someone to be surprised, then adjust their composure to an unthreatening but shocking event. Meyer, 1988, Hilliard, 1983, even across organisms. Bechtel, 2014. Taking into consideration all situations, this and other, racism false demonstrators is inhumane, negative reinforcement to the innocent individual. Payne, 2014. This is teaching children and adults to be racist through repetition of false positives, instead of teaching them not to be racist. Quote the Cognitive Failures Questionnaire, Broadbent, Revisited, Wallace. Example: my first friend was Aboriginal. I didn't know that he was any different from me. I only saw a boy my age until an adult told me so in a racist way, which made me sick, rather than inform me. A similar abortion of a system, that is suggested by Tatum, 1992. Teaching children that they're different is to cultivate racism, not the solution to it, which is supported by psychological theory. Myers-Lipton, 1996. Racism is learned by pointing out differences and opinions before they can be understood by the developing brain. Cognitive failures, negative reinforcement, leads to learned helplessness, a condition whereby an organism gives up hope of being able to do things that are within their power, and instead submit to learned patterns. Example: I am racist, I can't help it, so I will be racist, or hate myself, to self-decrement. Abramson, 1978. Such as the Clark or white male phenomenon, where they will believe and accept anything detrimental to their true character by impulse rather than acknowledgement or reality. Hiroto, 1975. Meyer, 1976. This is also demonstrated in men's compulsion to simp or virtue signal. Hiroto, 1975, within 0.43 milliseconds. Payne, 2014. Leaving children and men with the first compulsion is to virtue signal, and white knight, to combat false perception of self, and negative reinforced false guilt or false confession, Cassin, 1996. To be told you're different is to cultivate racism and structural violence against children, especially male ones, which should be considered structural violence. Galtung, 1971, A Crime Against Humanity, Farmer, 2004, Cruel and Unusual Psychological Punishment, Farmer, 1996, and in America a violation of the Eighth Amendment, especially when children are subjected to it, Lutz, 1999. It is extremely important for academics to understand that the push or justification for creating gender studies academic positions for women is of forming hate culture within the education system. To create these academic positions has led to the fabrication of evidence through academic dishonesty and outright fabrication. This cult mentality discounts sexism and racism from subsets of society just to demonize white males, which is not only academically dishonest and delusional, but a violation of inalienable human rights and the responsibility of government for human security. Conclusion. What you should take away from this. Racism amongst men is far less prevalent than what we are led to believe. That normal competition-based instinct are often misinterpreted under the hegemony of liberal regressive education as a confirmation bias, a racism to push a delusional narrative. That it intentionally targets men for normal biological and healthy competition and twists it with confirmation bias or outright dishonesty into fictional racism and inhumane negative reinforcement. This has most likely led to the white male or white guilt phenomena. That this is created by a false assumption on a sociology cognitive chronometer experiment that is deeply flawed and is likely to be intentionally biased in light of other research. Due to the fact that racial conflict only starts to become a prominent problem when racial groups have incompatible beliefs and behaviors that threaten the existing culture when it expands beyond 17 to 30% of said society, due to the protective instinct and evolutionary reproductive success instinct or framework. Finally, the teaching curriculum to prevent racism is most likely the cause, and through negative reinforcement cultivates racism through mechanisms such as learned belief frameworks and learned helplessness against an illusionary enemy of self. Racial education in light of research and simple methodological logic does more damage to society and more than likely encourage racism rather than reduce it. This education framework is more likely to create dysfunctional or psychologically damaged men or incite resentment and anger within groups that are subjected to this injustice. Further research by myself is already underway to academically discuss sexism and rape myth under the same framework, but time and finances are almost non-existent, which is the reason why this article is so late in development. If you would like to see more research like this, done in a timely manner, please support in any way that you can. End communication.